put up my version, not expecting anything, honestly, just kind of thinking like, oh, this is a fun thing. And like, I'm going to do, I think it was like a YA romance version. Yeah. Like the next day it had 750,000 views or something. And
Oh,
I was like, oh, and I was honestly kind of freaked out because I was like, oh, this guy's going to see that I basically just copied his idea. And like, I wasn't expecting it to take off like that. Eventually, I think someone tagged him in the video and he was stoked. He was like, this is awesome. Like, why don't we make one together? And so then we made one together. And then I started kept making them, making more of them, and more of them became successful and more of them took off. I think the biggest one that I posted is at like 1.9 million views or something like that
wow.
on TikTok. And I had one get to like 4.5 million on Instagram, I think. But yeah, not expected at all.
Welcome to Raising Baby Authors. I'm Cassia, your host, and a brand new writer. If you feel overwhelmed and lost about this whole writing thing, you're certainly not alone. Join me while I pester my author guests for writing advice and find out how they do it. Because if they could, then why not you? It truly takes a village to raise an author, so let me share my village with you. Hello, dear listener, and welcome back to the classroom. Thank you so much for giving me your time and attention, and let's meet our new tutor today. It's author Liz Shipton. Liz is a freelance writer, indie author, and full-time off-grid live-aboard sailor. She's currently sailing around the world with her boyfriend and her dog, turning her real-life adventures into speculative fiction. She feels extremely grateful to be able to explore the world, and she loves incorporating the experiences, places, and people she encounters on her travels into her work. She also uses her books as a means to explore themes of mental health, addiction, technology, climate change, and the looming collapse of society, but like in a fun way. When she's not penning novels about the impending apocalypse, she works as a freelance content writer, specializing in articles about code, music theory, and off grid living. On the rare occasion she's not writing, you can find her swimming, hiking, telling her dog she loves her for the bazillionth time today, or watching Taskmaster. Hi, Liz.
Hey, how are
Hi.
you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
I'm so
I'm
happy to
excited to
have
be
you
here.
here. uh, right off the bat, a question. What is a
Mhm.
taskmaster?
Oh man, Taskmaster, you probably don't want to ask me this question because I could literally talk about it for hours. It's just the greatest TV show that's ever been produced in the history of all TV shows. But it's like a comedy show. It's a British comedy show. I'm British. I was actually born in England and I moved to the States when I was like 9. So I have like a big soft spot in my heart for, British TV. I think there's something sort of comforting about it for me, which may be part of why I love it so much. But basically, it's like a comedy panel show where they have, I think it's 5 comedians, 5 British like TV personalities or comedians, and they compete to do these tasks. And the tasks can be anything from like eat this egg, and it's just like a raw egg on the table, and then
Mm.
it's like fastest wins, your time starts now. So the funny and the comedy of it comes from seeing the way that different people approach the tasks. So like some people will literally just like crack the egg on the table and eat it raw. Someone will go and prepare like a full 5 course meal with the egg and come back, like the tasks are just so sort of bonkers and out there, and the people that are completing them are so funny and smart that it's just a really great show. And there's 2 hosts, Greg Davies and Alex Horn, and they have this great dynamic where one of them is just sort of he's the taskmaster, and he's kind of like a bully and a little bit mean, and then his assistant is this sort of like Weasley little guy who and just I feel like I'm not explaining it very well, but their dynamic is just so great. It's a really funny show. Highly recommend it if anyone hasn't seen it.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how I've never heard of this. I usually watch a lot of stuff, but I guess if it's not on Netflix, then I don't really seek
Yeah,
out TV.
it's not on Netflix, but it is on YouTube. I think you can watch like pretty much all the episodes for free, maybe on YouTube.
Okay.
So that's definitely, yeah, I would do that
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure.
I'm planning to pay for YouTube anyway. I canceled my Netflix and I'm gonna pay for YouTube now because I watch that way more than Netflix
That's
somehow.
true. Yeah, me too, actually. Yeah.
And the ads are getting annoying. So
Oh my
yeah.
God, I know. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, thanks for that. That's a new thing to watch. Let's start from the beginning. So tell me something about your background. When did you start writing? Did you always want to be a writer? Anything you want to tell me?
Sure. So I definitely, when I was like a little kid, I wrote. I mean, I think the first thing I ever wrote was, in first grade or something. I wrote like a page long story about a lobster on a sailing on a boat. Actually, ironically,
Of course.
it's so funny. I never actually put that together before, but I wrote this little story about a lobster in the ocean, and he gets like caught by some fishermen. So that's like the very first thing. And I mean, I was like 6 or something when I wrote that. And then all through kind of like elementary school, I would write, and I always really loved it. And then I didn't actually come back to it until a couple of years ago when my boyfriend, my partner, and I bought a sailboat to live on, and we started sailing that boat from our home in California down the Pacific coast of the United States and through Mexico and Central America. And at that time, I kind of part of the reason that I wanted to pursue this lifestyle living on the boat and sailing is because I knew it would give me the freedom to explore some work that more creative stuff that wouldn't necessarily be able to do in like a typical 9 to 5 situation. So that was when I really started writing properly again in earnest. But before that, like, in between the time of me being 6 and now, I was in theater for quite a while, and I was a musician for a long time. And so I had my own band. I wrote a lot of music. I studied music, and I composed music. I wrote music. I performed music. And so that, I think, is like where a lot of my kind of writing energy and creativity was going. And then, yeah, came back to writing it like probably almost 3.5 years ago or something like that at this point.
3.5 years ago. I've seen you have a lot of books like on Amazon. If you if you go through, there's a
Yep.
lot of books there.
Yes, I've written a lot of books in those 3 years. It's been,
Wow. Okay.
yeah.
And so you always planned to publish, or it was just like a fun activity to do?
I am sort of a person that when I do a thing, I'm gonna probably just do it. And I'm gonna go at it super hard, and I'm gonna try to do it all the way. So I think in the back of my mind, I was always kind of thinking, yes, I'm gonna publish this and I'm gonna put it out there. Book one, the very first thing I wrote, which is this one, which if people have read it, just it gets better. My writing gets better. This one's it's good. It's fine, but I can do a lot better than that now. Just putting that out there. But this one took like probably a year to write, and then once I had done that, everything else started to write much more quickly. So I'm at the point now where I can write a book in like 3 or 4 months. I can actually. I've written a book before in like 5 weeks. I don't recommend that. It's not a good time. So yeah, like 3 to 4 months now is about how long it would take me to write like a book, and I am, once again, I've pursued this weird alternate lifestyle of living on the boat, which affords me a lot of time. I have more time than most people probably to devote to writing. And that is how I spend the majority of my time because I just love it so much. So that's how I was able to put out so many books in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, that's amazing. And when you say from 3 months to write a book, would that be like from nothing until you can publish it?
Yeah, pretty much. So, like right now, I have a book coming out in January 2025. It's August, September, October, November, December. So that's like 5 months. So I've just started. I'm giving myself a little bit extra time. But yeah, I mean, I don't, I don't think it's necessarily for everyone to do it that way. And if I have more time, I'll definitely take it. But I think, at a pace of like, let's say my books are between 30 and 33 chapters, at a pace of 2 to 3 chapters a week. If you have more time, obviously it's definitely better, especially because ideally you want to finish writing the book and then like walk away from it for a couple of weeks, even a month, and then come back and edit it. You're just going to be a lot fresher and find a lot of things. So that's not necessarily something that I have done with all of these books. But what I have done is I've ended up going back later and like re-editing and re-releasing a lot of them, because as my writing has gotten better and as I've improved, I've gone back and read book one and been like, oh god, this is awful, and then I go through and I like re-edit the whole thing and like re-release it. So there's quite a lot of different versions actually of my books out in the world at
So
this point.
Salt has been re-released already.
Yes, yeah, there's quite a lot of different versions of it actually. So.
Okay, that's very interesting. And so when you were doing this kind of, I would say, fast-paced, probably, I don't know what's the regular process, but I've heard anything from a couple of months to like a year. Did you have a goal in mind? So I want to, like, for example, you want to publish it quickly, you want to have a backlist of, I don't know, 10 books or something like that. Or it was just because, okay, the book is ready, I'm going to publish it.
I would say, yeah, I definitely, in the beginning, there was a thought process behind it of, so I think I got this from like the 20 books to 50K group. I don't know if you're
Hmm.
familiar with that, but there's a
Yes.
Facebook group where early on, a lot of what I was kind of learning was coming from them. And I think they recommend like, it's always easier to sell a book if you've got more books behind it to sell. It's always easier to sell like a trilogy, for example, than it is to sell a single book. So what I actually did with these was I wrote books 1, 2, and 3 before I published any of them, and then I published all three of them at once. And then I went back and wrote, I think I wrote a prequel next, and then I wrote book 4 and book 5, and I'm now currently writing book 6. So yes, there was definitely an intention behind it of I want to have a backlist out there. I know that I'm going to make more money if I have more books out there. And B, I think people are just more likely to pick up a book if they see that it's a completed series or if they see that there's at least a trilogy. It's also easier. There's like marketing things you can do or promotional things you can do where, like, let's say you make book 1 free and then you make book 2 99 cents and then you make book 3 1.99 and you promote like them as a whole set. That's like a really good way to drive people to kind of read the whole series and to keep reading.
It is interesting that it is your passion, it is what you like to do, but you did go into this with like a business mind.
I try. I'm not always super great at being business minded. There's definitely people out there who are doing it way better than I am. Like, I did not really write to market. I wrote a bunch of weird books that like don't really quite fit into a particular genre and actually have been really difficult to market because of that. So in that regard, I got failed. But the other, it's like I'm kind of coming at this from a divided mind of one half really wanting to be smart on the business front, but on the other half being like, this is an art for me, and it is passion and it is creativity, and I don't want to just put the same book out there that every single other person is writing. Um, so it's sort of a continuous process of like reconciling those two halves of my brain. I don't always do a very good job at it, but yeah.
All right. So you started self-publishing
Hmm.
and now you have an agent as far as I know. So how did that
Yes.
happen?
So that was literally just from my videos and social media presence. So most people probably know me from my silly fictional man videos where I sit at the computer and I type. So I started making those around October of last year, and a couple of them just like took off and went viral, and that was a big part of like kind of what really kicked everything into gear and started everything moving. So those videos got in front of quite a lot of people, one of whom was my agent, and she actually reached out to me via TikTok. She just sent me a DM on TikTok, and I was like, this is, I've never heard of this happening. Like, I was a little skeptical. I was like, I don't know if this person is legit. I don't know, if this is a real thing or if I can trust this person or whatever. So I did some research. I looked her up. I looked into her other clients, and she encouraged me to reach out to her other clients, which was a good sign. And I did, and they all had, great things to say about her. So I took a meeting, and basically she was just like, do you have anything that you would want to pitch to a traditional publisher? And it just so happened that I did. I had a book that I was planning to try and query this year anyway, or I didn't even have a book actually. I had an idea and like 3 chapters of the book. And so I said to her, like, this is what I'm thinking. And she was like, yeah, this seems great. Let's pitch this. So I just signed with her. At the time that we started pitching, I had just 3 chapters and a synopsis of the book. She pitched it for me. A publisher picked it up pretty quickly. And yeah, that was that was that. So now I'm doing both. I'm pursuing trad and indie publishing at the same time.
So you can really combine those two things. It's not like you have to do one or the other.
I think it's actually something that is good for authors to know, is like, yeah, you can do both. There's plenty of authors out there doing it. I think that me being a little bit established as an indie author and having a bit of a platform, especially on social media, definitely helped me to, one, get an agent, and two, get my book picked up by a publisher, because they like to see that you have an audience built in, right? That there is going to be a demand for this book, that they're going to buy from you.
Is the new book that you're pitching in any way related to the world that you built in the Classic series?
No, it's a totally different series. It's a new series. It's more fantasy based than this one. So these books are like basically dystopian. They're written to appeal to like fantasy romance readers, but they're not. There's no magic. There's no dragons or fairies or elves or anything like that. It's dystopian. The new book that I'm writing is leaning more towards fantasy. So there's magic. There's a magic system there. It's like academic fantasy. So it's set in the modern world. It's set at a school. It's like people learning to do magic. There's more to it than that, as there like always is in my books. But yes, it leans a little bit harder into that kind of fantasy romance genre.
This sounds like fun. I actually was going to ask you that later, but since you mentioned already that you became known for your reels, so what has changed? Like, how was the situation with like selling your books and exposure before you had those videos and after?
I would say, like, so as far as promotion goes right now, I don't do any other promotion except for social media. Mostly because at the moment I can't afford it. It's like expensive to pay for ads and to pay for promotion and stuff like that. I see a direct correlation between if I post a reel and it gets X number of views, I can go and look in KDP and I can see the numbers like directly translating like day to day. So if I see a spike in KDP, I can look at the date and be like, oh yeah, that's when I posted like XYZ reel. So there's definitely 100% a correlation between the videos on social media and the sales that I'm getting through Amazon, and also through my bookshop. So people find my website and they go to my bookshop and they buy direct from me as well, based on my reels. I will say that, like, because I don't talk about my books directly, and because I'm not really like selling my books directly, I definitely don't get as many sales as other people who are, for example, like posting a hook from their book and posting something directly about the book. I don't see the same numbers that someone like that is doing. But I mean, for me, that's fine, because I like making the videos and like it's more fun for me to do it that way. I am starting to realize now that like a lot of people who are following my accounts were like, oh, I didn't even know you wrote books. And I was like, no, well, I should be doing a much better job of letting people know that. So it's something I'm going to start posting a little bit more directly about my books. But yeah, the content that I do post, it drives people to my site, to my bio. They find a link tree, they find links to my books, and then they go and buy them. And
so they do find it from the link tree. Do you put anything in a caption, like by like a link? Well,
no,
you cannot
actually, until recently, no, I have not. I'm considering starting to do that. Right now, I just actually set up an Instagram shop. So I'm going to start tagging books in videos. Like, you can tag a product in your Instagram shop in a video so that people can directly like tap on the video to go and buy the thing from your Instagram shop. I haven't done that much yet, so I don't have any like data on how successful that is, but that's something that I'm moving towards.
Okay, that seems like it's gonna make it much easier. At least there's gonna be only one step. So hopefully, they click, they get to your book. Yeah. And so, okay, I'm gonna ask you about writing for sure. Last question about those videos, because I'm just very curious. Like you said, you started making them in October of last year. What was the idea behind it? Did you did you expect them to be successful?
So actually, yeah, I have to give credit where credit is due. So the initial idea for these videos, the concept was not my idea. It was actually, I came across someone else's video. There's a guy on TikTok called Jason Pinter. He goes by two names, Jason Pinter, A.L. Brody. He is an author. He's been writing for like 10 years, but he wrote recently a book called Dating and Dismemberment. It is like a monster rom-com. It's doing really well. It just got picked up by Entangled Publishing. And so I came across one of his videos, and he was doing this thing where he was sitting at the keyboard with the wavy fingers, and he had a voiceover going. And because I'd been on TikTok for like a year at that point, TikTok kind of trains you to, like, when you see a video, you see it and you think, oh, that's a fun idea. I kind of want to make my own version of that. Right. And that's like kind of how trends start. And that's how trending sounds happen, is like everyone, like someone will see a thing and they'll be like, oh, I'm going to make my own version of that. So that's basically what happened. Like I saw this video that he had put up that was doing really well, by the way. He's crushing it. He's like got, I think maybe close to 100,000 followers now. And he's still doing these videos and like all that. So I put up my version, not expecting anything, honestly, just kind of thinking like, oh, this is a fun thing. And like, I'm going to do, I think it was like a YA romance version. And yeah, like the next day it had 750,000 views or something.
Oh,
And I was like, oh, and I was honestly kind of freaked out because I was like, oh, this guy's going to see that I basically just copied his idea. And like, I wasn't expecting it to take off like that. And so he eventually, I think someone tagged him in the video and he was stoked. He was like, oh, this is awesome. Like, why don't we make one together? And so then we made one together. And then I started kept making more of them, and more of them became successful and more of them took off. I think the biggest one that I posted is at like 1.9 million views or something like that.
wow.
On TikTok. And I had one get to like 4.5 million on Instagram, I think. But yeah, not expected at all. I will say it was like I had been on TikTok for like a year at that point, and definitely had been like posting a lot, learning a lot, trying to absorb and see what was working for people, see what other people were doing, see what I could kind of take and make my own, and what original stuff I could put up there, and all that. There's sort of like a learning curve, I guess, maybe that has to happen with social media. You spend a lot of time on these platforms, and you start to see what works, and you start to understand what people respond to, and you start to know like, okay, I think this video or this type of video is going to do well.
I like Instagram, but I know that TikTok's super useful, especially for these short like videos that I'm going to be posting from the podcast. So it's a good platform. But and I don't like the quality of videos that are on TikTok, and I really wouldn't want to do them. But it's undeniable that I started just scrolling, and once I spent, I don't know, until 4 a.m. I was scrolling one time.
Yeah.
So it does work. As much as you may hate it, it still works. So yeah, it's a useful platform.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I've done a lot better on Instagram, and I think that's where I prefer to be, because I also like Instagram stories. You can put links to stuff. You can do photo posts. I think it's just kind of a bit better of a like rounded out platform. However, TikTok is definitely where I sort of learned what works, if that makes sense. So now I just post to both. I actually post everywhere now. I'm all over the place.
Yeah, that's a good, especially if you have like a scheduling app or something where you can just schedule one reel for all the platforms. Even though I don't think it's recommended. They say that like for TikTok and for Instagram, there are very different kinds of content that win in one place or the other.
Yeah, I mean, I think my stuff's definitely done better on Instagram, so that's probably true.
Okay, after almost half the time is over, I'm finally going to ask you about writing. How does your first draft look like? I mean, we all know first drafts are scary and often ugly and stuff. So how does it look like for you?
So definitely there's editing that needs to be done. I do try to get a fairly clean first draft, just because there's certain things that, like certain grammatical things and certain types of writing that just make me cringe and I don't want in my writing. So I will probably spend a bit longer on the first draft just to make sure I don't have that stuff in there. Because I think it's very easy to be going through a first draft and kind of like just writing fast and write something like her heart beat fast, she narrowed her eyes, and just sort of like throw all of these things in there that like we all know are overused and kind of cringy. So I actually kind of do my best to keep those out of the first draft. Some of them make their way in there, and then I have to go back and take them. But so, in fact, before the first draft, what I actually do is I will plot out the whole arc of the story using the 15 beats method from Save the Cat. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but there's a book called Save the Cat, which is for screenwriting. But then there's also Save the Cat Writes a Novel, which is that concept applied to novel writing. I think it's one of the only books I've actually read on craft, and I found it incredibly useful. So I use the 15 beats, for every story that I've written so far. Once I have the 15 beats, then I'll go back and I will basically bullet point every chapter. So I usually know that there's going to be around 30 chapters or so in my book. And I know at this point that, like, okay, I need the catalyst to happen probably by the end of chapter 3. I know that I want the midpoint to happen around chapter 20, probably. I know that, what is it, the High Tower surprise, or like the real big plot twist or whatever, is going to come maybe 3 chapters before the end, something like that. So I kind of have this structure in my mind when I go through and I bullet point out all the chapters. And then once I've got bullet points for all the chapters, then I'll go back to chapter 1 and start writing, rough draft chapter by chapter. I usually go pretty much straight through. Like, I don't jump around very much when I'm writing. I'll just start at the beginning and write through to the end. Stuff will definitely change. So I'll get halfway through and realize, like, oh, the bullet points in this chapter don't work, or I've got to rewrite all of these, or I've got to rewrite several chapters, or I've got to move some things around or switch up a couple of chapters or whatever. One book, actually, the second book in this series, I had plotted out the entire thing to be just the main character and her dog. And then I was like in chapter 11, and all of a sudden my fingers were just writing this new character into existence that I had not intended to be there. All of a sudden she was just there, and I was like, well, what am I going to do with you now? And so I had to go back and replot the entire book with this extra character in it, because I knew, like, I had a sense that, like, yeah, this is going to be better if I have her in there. I can see how she'll be like a nice foil for the main character, and so I just sucked it up and did it, and I'm glad that I did. But yeah, so I think I try really hard to have a pretty solid structure in mind, but I also know that as I'm writing, I need to be flexible and allow for things to just come up naturally that might derail the whole process.
So I see that, okay, well, you're a plotter and you have a plan, and if something comes up, let's say at 50%, you've already like written 50% of your first draft, and then suddenly, okay, a new character pops up. So you don't really push through, you go back, you replot, and then
If that happened, yes, definitely. There's definitely, although there are also times, like, so sometimes as I'm writing something, I'll be like, I don't really think this is right. I'll just like mark it in the document and, like, okay, I know I'm going to come back to that later. And then that's probably like when I get to the editing part, the first thing I'll do is go back and find all of those big sections where I'm like, okay, this chapter was garbage. Like, I need to rewrite the whole thing. Or like, these 2 chapters need to be switched. Or like, this scene needs to happen here. Or, characters' intentions aren't clear in this particular chapter. So like, that's like step 1 of editing for me, is like going back and addressing all of those like big crucial issues that I maybe sort of swept aside while I was writing. But if it's something where it's like literally going to change the entire rest of the book, then yeah, I'll just stop and replot everything.
even if you have to go back to the first chapter, but you just replot, or you like rewrite the first draft then?
Ideally, I would just like replot all the bullet points that I haven't gotten to yet. There's not necessarily any cut and dried way of doing it, right? I think a lot of the times it's just a process of like you knowing, oh, yeah, I know this part's not good. Okay, I'm just gonna go back and redo it, and it's gonna suck, but I'm just gonna have to do it. So yeah, that happened a couple times in the last book that I was writing. But ultimately, I'm so glad that I did it because the story is so much stronger now for like having addressed those issues.
All right. And so when you're talking about editing, at least the first stages, that's all you. So there is no developmental editor there. There is no beta readers there. Nothing like that yet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've actually never used an editor. I've never paid a developmental editor or a line editor or proofreader or anything like that. I have had beta readers and I have had ARC readers. So and I've had a couple of writing partners. So I've approached this whole thing as like, how can I spend as little money as possible? Because I just don't have the money to spend. So, I did like my covers as cheaply as possible. I have spent as little as possible on like marketing. I don't pay for editors, anything like that. It takes an incredible amount of my time, but like that's the resource that I have. Like because I chose to pursue this weird lifestyle, living on the boat, I have time. So like that's where I can like save money and spend time. That's where I've been at it for now. But my beta readers have been incredibly useful in that regard. And then the couple of writing partners that I've had where basically we've traded manuscript reads where I send my manuscript to them, they send theirs to me. We both go through, we make pretty detailed notes. That's been super helpful and definitely a good way to get some really good editorial feedback without having to pay a whole bunch of money for a developmental editor.
I've heard like you can use either development or editor or beta readers, but both of them are probably not necessary. So, how did you find your beta readers?
Good question. Oh, yes. Okay. I have a great answer for this. Actually, what I did was found ARC readers first. So that was when I first went on TikTok. That was how I was using TikTok. I was literally, this is when I had, no followers, anything like that. I was going into the app every single day and all of the accounts that TikTok recommends that you follow, anything that looked remotely bookish or like someone who was a reader, I would follow them. And then I would basically just reach out to them in a direct message and say, hey, I have this book. I'm looking for some readers. I would love to send you a free copy of the ebook. If you're interested, please let me know. And that was literally how I first started to build a following on TikTok, was just reaching out to people in DMs. I think, some people recommend that you don't do that because people don't like to get DMs or don't like to get harassed. So just don't harass people, right? Like be nice, be cool, send them one message. If they don't get back to you, fine, move on. And again, it's labor intensive, right? Like it took a lot of my time to do that, but that was the resource that I had available to me was time. So
Yeah, it's definitely an option. I'm an ARC reader, so I read a lot for for NetGalley and for different authors,
mm-hmm,
and I've got different kinds of messages. I mean, the best ones, of course, were the personal ones where a person had actually seen my account, seen a couple
mm-hmm,
of posts, maybe like can tell me why exactly they think I can read their book. But I've also gotten like the non-personal message where I can see that this message has been sent probably to like 500 other people, and I
mm-hmm.
don't mind them. If I don't want to answer, I'm
Yeah,
just not going to answer. It's fine. Like
right,
if I don't have
exactly.
time, okay, it's
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, and I kind of think that like, in the message I would write sort of a very brief bit about like here's what the book's about. And if someone reads that and thinks, "Oh, that's a book that I might find interesting," then great, maybe they'll reach out. And if they don't, whatever. Yeah.
I got a couple of messages when a link was thrown at me directly. These ones I
Mm.
was not answering. Like, hello, here's my book, and here's a link to it. I'm like, okay,
Yeah. I don't
no
know if I
thanks.
would ever do that. I would always just kind of make it a sort of like, yeah, personal is great. Or just like a, hey, how are you? I
Yeah,
have this book.
you
Let me know.
cannot be personal with a lot of people. So, how much, like, how do you think the success rate was there? Like, you reached out to X amount of people, then the Y amount of people actually left reviews on your books.
Honestly, I don't remember how many people I actually reached out to. I think I ended up getting through that process probably like 50 reviews on my first book, which is a pretty good amount. And it also, I mean, what was great was that some of the people who read it really loved it. And then I had a direct, and they DM'd me back, and this is someone who now is like in my Discord and is an arc reader for me, and is like, I consider her my like number one fan, because I reached out to her in a cold DM like that. She read the book, she loved it, and she messaged me back and was like, "Oh my god, I loved it so much, and I'm painting pictures based on it, and I love the characters, and yeah, da da da," and like, so that also was really inspirational for me to hear that someone connected with the book in that way, and to have that direct feedback from them was one of the things that made me think like, oh, okay, well maybe these books like could be something, and inspired me to like keep going. So yeah.
Did you also get some negative experiences from there as well?
Oh yeah, totally. But I think less so. I definitely had some people who came back and were like, nah, this isn't really for me. And I was like, okay. And like inside my heart is crumbling, but you know, whatever. Just gotta like move on.
I started asking every author now, do you check your reviews on Goodreads or Amazon? No?
No, I can't. I genuinely cannot. I'm too scared. My star rating for this book, for book one right now, is like a 3.9 on Goodreads, and it kills me. It kills me that it isn't just at least 4 stars, because in my mind it's a 5-star book, obviously. Like, but yeah, so I just can't read reviews. If it's a review from one of my like known arc readers who's like been supporting me and I have a relationship with, then yes, I will definitely read. Or if someone tags me in a TikTok video about my book, I'm assuming they're not going to tag me and then just totally trash me. So
You'd
I'll
think
usually
so?
watch those. You would hope so. It hasn't happened yet. So but no, I don't read Amazon reviews. I don't read Goodread reviews. I thought about it for a while because I thought like, oh, I should be reading the feedback from people to see what I'm doing wrong and see what I could fix. But then honestly, I kind of just thought, no, I don't care. I'm gonna write what I want to write. I'm gonna force people to read it. And
Well, I mean,
that's where I'm at right now.
that's a good strategy. But also you have beta readers for that now. You don't need to ask for feedback from people who just randomly read and maybe just in a bad mood.
And I mean, like reading even a review that is like 4 stars because I didn't like this one tiny thing, that will just go around in my head for months, and I can't.
Yeah, I can understand. I mean, I haven't published anything yet. I can only speak from a reader's perspective so far. But from a reader's perspective, if I read a book and I like 99% of it, but there's this one thing that just keeps sitting in my head and it just doesn't let me put a 5 star on it, that's also very annoying.
I'm
But yeah,
sure. Yeah.
it's better
Yeah.
if you don't know about it. Yeah, I think this is going to be my like mandatory question from now on, because I'm conducting an experiment. I've asked a couple of authors, and I think I forgot the first two, but then the third one told me, please, please don't read your reviews ever. Then the one yesterday said, oh, I read my reviews. They've all so far been nice. I cannot stop myself. It's fun actually. And then you tell me no. So I'm just gonna have a tally. I'm
I think
curious.
it's something that's probably very personal, and that you probably, your attitude about it changes. Because definitely when I first was getting reviews, most of them were positive. So the book was at like 4.8 stars, and I had like 50 or so reviews, and all the reviews that were coming in were great. And I was like, cool, I'll read these. And then like negative reviews started coming in, and I was like, I don't need to do this anymore.
Yeah, especially with your following that you have, it's probable that a lot of people who maybe are not, just like, your book is not for them probably, but they picked it up and
Right.
and they wouldn't like it, and they're not your target audience, and they will write something mean, and why do you need to see that? Exactly.
Right, exactly. I also think a little bit that the social media stuff does backfire a little bit, because my videos are very much like comedy videos, and this series is like not really. There's humor in it, but I mean, for one thing, this is the first book I ever wrote, and I wrote it way before I started making those videos, and way before I really had a sense of like my comedic voice. So I think people sometimes will see my videos, they'll see that they're funny, and then they'll go into this book expecting it to be really funny, and like it's funny in places, but it's not like comedy. So I think that can, like, people maybe have a slightly what's the word, like a skewed expectation of what the book
Hmm.
is going to be because they discover me through my videos. So yeah, I don't know. I'm hoping that the trad publishing book that is coming out next year, which is definitely a lot more funny, will kind of start to rectify that a little bit.
Okay, well, I'm super excited about that. Actually, something that I forget to ask from a lot of writers, but I'm really interested in is if you don't want to answer it, don't answer. But what do you think is like your biggest weakness as a writer? What do you work on to improve?
That is a good question. So I'm constantly trying to remove things that make me cringe from my work. There's some things that I just haven't figured out a good way to do that yet. So for example, a lot of stuff that I kind of poke fun at in my videos, like her eyes narrowed and like her heart lurched and her stomach twisted and all that kind of stuff. Like I'm like, just get it. I don't want it. I don't want it in there. But there are still places where I just can't think of a better alternative. So I'm working on that. I'm like trying to find better ways to say things, more interesting ways to say things, more poetic ways or funnier ways or whatever. So I think that's something that I work on a lot. Another thing is probably honestly just like being kind of a perfectionist and not being able to let a thing go. And just, I mean, I actually really love to edit, and I will go and edit and tweak and fix and shape and just forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. So I'm starting to try to work on like letting things go and moving on from them.
Oh yeah, that's a big thing for me as well. Not that I've written any book from beginning to end yet. I only have a first draft finish at the moment, but I write a lot of like for work. I write technical papers and stuff,
Oh, cool.
and often it's just if I look at this thing one more time, if I start reading it again, I will start fixing it again. So I cannot
Yeah,
proofread. I cannot proofread because I start changing things. It's
yeah.
horrible.
Out of curiosity, what kind of technical papers do you write?
So I'm a researcher, so I work in data science. I've written a couple of papers for conferences on the topics of natural language processing. So
Oh, interesting. Okay.
deep learning, stuff like
Hmm.
that. Yeah, so I haven't done
That's
that in a while.
huh. Cool. Interesting. So the book that I'm writing for my trad debut is I actually don't know if I can talk about it yet because we haven't officially announced it. But it's digging into AI a little bit. I used to be a coder. I don't know really anything about natural language processing or machine learning or AI or anything like that. But I wrote a whole book about it. So yeah,
Oh, well, okay. So that means I probably will be super interested to read it.
it sounds like it'll hopefully be right up your street.
When I see even a developer in a book, I'm like, oh, okay, this could be nice. Since you were mentioning that you are trying to like improve some of the cringy writing that you think is cringy, and just to try to do things better, how do you go about it? Like, do you read a lot in the genre or outside the genre? Do you read craft books? What do you do?
So my like dirty little secret is I actually don't read that much, like at all, and I don't read romance really, like at all. I read very slowly and I read very selectively. What am I reading right now? Right now I'm reading this, and I'm reading it very slowly. It's great. Highly recommend it if anyone
Hmm.
wants to read it. As far as like getting rid of the things that I don't like, I just have a sense, like a feeling of like I don't like that. I don't want that in there. I think that you have to push yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit to write things that kind of make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. So there's sort of like a fine line to walk between, do I want to get rid of this because it makes me uncomfortable, or do I want to get rid of this because I think it's bad? And the process of doing that is just, I don't know, just deciding deciding for yourself, I guess. But yeah, I don't actually read a ton within the genre. I should
That
probably read more.
That is interesting because, I mean, just from the videos that you're making, it seems like you're picking up on cliches very nicely. And
Well,
then,
that's the thing, right? Is like that's to me is more of an indication of how basic and like easy to understand these stereotypes and cliches are. Is like I can literally read a book blurb for one enemies to lovers romance and be like, oh, okay, I see what this is, and make 5 videos about it.
Okay, because my understanding was that I'm watching your video and I'm like, wow, she probably read like 100 fantasy romances just who came up with
Nope.
all of that.
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah, Book Talk and Bookstagram are going to crucify me for this. Like, they're going to come at me so hard if they find out, but I got to just live my truth, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, in terms of cliches, I am on a group on Facebook. I forgot the name of the group. I'm like in 10 different groups. There is an ongoing thing there. If somebody reads a romance, whichever subgenre, and sees this phrase, oh my God, what is it? I let out a breath I didn't know I've been holding.
Yep.
And so you have to take a picture and post it. I see like 3 of those every day.
Yeah. But this is the other thing I think that's what is great about the romance community and about like the Book Talk and Bookstagram romance community is that I think we all sort of know this a little bit, and it's kind of like an unspoken joke and an in joke of the romance community of like, yeah, these like stupid, terrible phrases that we all kind of hate, but we all just read them anyway for some reason. But that's what's great. It's like everyone is kind of a good sport about it, and everyone has a sense of humor about it, which is what makes it kind of fun.
Yeah, this kind of thing wouldn't just make me put down a book. It's still going to be fun. We don't
Yeah,
take each other too seriously, which is nice.
exactly.
We're not
Yes,
going to be like,
exactly.
oh, this language, this prose is horrible. How could you even look at that? No, I'm just gonna. This story is amazing. Let's talk about writing advice. What is the best and or the worst writing advice that you got?
I would think that the best writing advice and the writing advice that I always stand by, and it's really boring, is just you just have to write all the time. The only way that you're going to get better at writing is if you just do it a lot. You can read all the craft books you want. You can read in the genre. You can, like, reading is not writing at the end of the day. You just have to write. And the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. And the more you'll find your voice and the more you'll find the thing about you that makes you different from everybody else. So that's, I'd say, like the best writing advice. And I know it's like boring. It's like what everyone says, but it's true.
Well, I mean, it's good to hear after all. It's good to hear that just by keeping at it, I might
Mm-hmm.
get better.
Yeah. I mean, there's no way that you can't really. You will get better if you just keep going. The worst. I don't know if I have any worst writing advice. I'm trying to
Okay,
think.
what are your thoughts about show don't tell, for example?
Yeah, I don't think about that very much. Yes, definitely you should be doing that. Yes, you should show, don't tell. It's hard to say something as simple as that without like really elaborating. So I think like show, don't tell, but then maybe like explain a little bit better about like what you actually mean by that.
Yeah, you're right. There's whole books written on it. I have one behind me that I've read by Janice Hardy, I think. So that's a very nice book but it has to explain one concept in like 100 pages after all. So it is not that easy. Is there any podcast, YouTube channel, craft book, whatever that you could recommend for people who write, who want to publish?
I definitely recommend Save the Cat Writes a Novel for craft, for just learning how to plot a story that will keep people going through the story. There's a book on character development that I read. I think it's called Story Genius. So, Story Genius: How to Use Brain Science to Go Beyond Outlining and Write a Riveting Novel Before You Waste 3 years Writing 327 Pages That Go Nowhere. That was another good book that I read that has some nice exercises, like hands-on stuff that you can do to kind of prepare before you start writing. So yeah, highly recommend that. As far as like publicity and promotion goes, there's a lot of good Facebook groups out there. I found 20 Books to 50K to be a good one. There's a guy called Bobby Kim who teaches people how to do like TikTok slideshows for promoting your book, how to like write a hook. You've probably seen these if anyone's on TikTok or maybe even Instagram, they have them, where there'll be like a photo with a hook from the book written on it. And then you swipe through and there's like excerpts from the book. So there's a Facebook group, I forget the name of the group, but the guy who runs it is Bobby Kim, and he has like a whole course that kind of teaches you this method of writing these hooks and putting them up on TikTok. And I've done this. It's an incredible amount of work, but it does work if you can figure out how to pull the right hooks out of your book and use those to sell your book. Super, super useful.
So it is a lot of work, meaning that you have to like reread your book in order to find the hooks, or like
In order to, so you just have to make a lot of videos and post a lot of videos. It just takes
just to
time.
discover what works.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've heard on some lecture that for finding the hooks, like if you don't want to literally like reread your whole book, you can try if you're brave enough to feed it into ChatGPT and ask it to return me back, please, the
Interesting.
phrases that could be a hook, and apparently it might work.
Huh. That's interesting. I had never considered using AI in that regard before. I'm definitely, I mean, I know AI is like a super, very sort of tricky thing to navigate as a writer.
Yes.
I just wrote a whole book on how evil it is, and I don't necessarily know if I believe that it is totally evil. I get that's a reduction of the book. It's not actually about how AI is evil. You have to read the book to know what it's about. But anyway, yeah, it's a difficult thing to navigate, but that is an interesting use case for it that I haven't ever heard before. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I've heard that being recommended. I don't think the use itself is tricky because you're not really asking it to write anything for you. You're asking it just to
yeah,
find passages. What I'm
yeah,
worried about is actually feeding my manuscript into anything online. So that is kind of what bothers me. But
yeah, yeah.
um, yeah, but on the other hand, it might not work that well. For example, here in this tool that I'm using right now, they have this feature called Magic Clips. So they're going through the transcript of our conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and it will spit out 10 different clips of like 30 seconds, which are supposed to be the highlights. And no, they're
Huh.
not. They're not highlights.
Interesting.
I
Yeah.
had to I had to generate those things myself while I'm editing the episode. Present as a highlight is really not an interesting piece of information. So it still needs a lot to go, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's actually interesting. So coming from a like musical background and doing a lot of audio work, and I've done some very basic like audio engineering, it seems to me that audio engineering is a place where AI could be super useful because like editing an audio track, particularly just a voice track, where there's no indication really in the track where certain things are happening, it would be so useful for editing to have something that could go through and say, oh, here's where you need to cut out this part because her video dropped out or whatever, instead of you having to go through and like literally search for those places. I don't know if they have those tools available yet, but they didn't when I was
Well,
doing any kind of editing.
I can tell you how it happens now. For example, here in this tool, or so I'm using Riverside, and that's
Mm-hmm.
like a platform for podcasters, and there's another one called Descript, I think. So they both work in a similar manner. They produce a transcript of your conversation, which is usually very good, except when it's me talking because I make mistakes, and then it comes out sometimes as nonsense, but that's okay.
Huh.
And so, how you can edit it is actually by working with the text. If I want to remove a
Right.
pause or an or something,
Yeah.
I can just, it's not perfect, like, but with this, I'm not as much of a perfectionist as with other things because it will take me
Mm-hmm.
3 days to edit one episode if I try to do it like millisecond by
Right.
millisecond. So
Exactly.
I'm just
Yeah.
trying to work with those words, and that actually works. And they do have as well something called Magic Voice, I think. So they process the tracks through AI. I don't know what kind of AI, but they try to just like extract like the clear voice and remove all the noises
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. I only used it on one episode because I did a stupid thing and I had an echo on my
Mm-hmm.
side. So it removed that echo.
Oh,
It's
that's
not great,
nice.
but it works. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, the transcript thing, yeah, that is definitely useful because that's the one thing I remember from editing audio was like just it's just impossible to go in and find all those spots.
Yeah, the best thing, I mean, pauses is not a problem because you can at least see on the audio wave where there's nothing, you
Hmm.
can remove the pause, but it identifies things like ums and like when you're just sitting like,
Yeah.
and then, yeah, this it can know and can tell you. But again, it's not 100%. Like sometimes it swallows the words together with the other
Right.
stuff. So you have to be careful. You cannot just like there's a button that says remove all pauses or remove all these kinds of parasites. But you don't, I never do that. You cannot do that because then the whole recording is going to be choppy and ugly.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I digress. Sorry. It's
No, that's
just
fine. It's super interesting for me. I'm sure you'll probably cut it out of the final episode. I'm interested.
one thing that I ask usually is also how do people balance life and writing. But what I hear from you is that actually your lifestyle helps your writing. How did you decide on this lifestyle? Is it your plan to do it for the next 10, 20 years, for example? What attracts you in it?
Yeah, I definitely intentionally pursued this, knowing that it would support my lifestyle. I actually always like to say, a lot of authors are trying to figure out how to make writing support their lifestyle. I came at it from the other way and tried to figure out how I can make my lifestyle support my writing. So yeah, it was intentional for sure. It wasn't the only reason that we did this. We also, my boyfriend loves to sail and we wanted to travel and we wanted to not spend $1 million on a house in California because we literally just couldn't afford it. So, there were multiple reasons, but being able to write was definitely one of them. Do we plan to do this for the next 10 years? I don't know. I think we're at a point where we're starting to think about sort of heading back towards California, partly because our parents are, getting on in years and we'd like to spend some time with them. But I think even if we do live in California, we're probably going to keep living on the boat, which means that our lifestyle will still be quite cheap and quite minimal, which will continue to support me being able to do this. So, yeah, I mean, for me, it is kind of the only thing I want to do. And at this point, it might be the only thing that I can do. I got to figure out a way to make it work and keep doing it. So, yeah.
So it is like a fairly, as you're saying, like a cheap lifestyle, meaning that you
Mm-hmm.
don't need to spend a ton of money on supporting like the boat itself. So it's not really
Right.
demanding.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So like for example, our monthly costs are very low. We don't pay any rent. We don't have a car. We don't have insurance. We don't pay a mortgage. We don't have kids. That's separate, but it's also part of the reason why we don't have those. Yes. So I can support our lifestyle through, up until recently, I was supporting our lifestyle through freelancing work, which was pretty part time and left me a lot of time to work on my books. Now I'm at a point where I'm starting to try and transition to making the books be like my primary source of income. And even though that income is still very low at this point, like I'm not making a ton of money as an author, it kind of doesn't matter as much because our lifestyle is so inexpensive and so minimal that we can afford to kind of figure that out and make it work. Does that make
So,
sense?
yeah, yeah, it does. I'm only asking because I have no knowledge and no baseline on like the boat leaving or sailing or anything like that. So just I'm just curious. Do
Mm-hmm.
you, since you live in a boat, do you sail a lot?
Yeah, I mean, so we anchor, which means we don't pay to live anywhere. Basically, we sometimes will go and stay at a marina, which costs money to go and tie up alongside a dock or whatever. But for the most part, we're anchoring. We spend a little bit on fuel because we can't always sail. Sometimes the wind's not right or there is no wind or whatever, so we have to use the motor. So fuel is a cost. And then it's just, like our food. Sometimes we have to pay for water. But that's really it, you know? So, our monthly costs are pretty low in this lifestyle. And yeah, we do sail a lot. So we've sailed from California all the way down the Pacific coast through Central America. We came through the Panama Canal and we're now in the Caribbean. And we'll be in the Caribbean until the end of this year. And then next summer, I think we're going maybe up the east coast of the United States. And at that point, actually, my boyfriend's probably going to get some work as an electrician and we'll hang out in one place for a while still living on the boat, and he'll work and we'll save a little bit more money, and then we'll head out again.
Oh, that sounds amazing. I literally know nothing about it. So when like hearing about a completely different lifestyle, I'm surprised that that anchoring for you is free, I'm assuming. Like it's
It
just
depends. It depends on the place, but in most places, yes, or most places that we've been, at least, yeah.
so I'm not living in the US, and what I imagine would be a lot of people being unhappy about someone doing something for free. Just like, why are you here? Why are you here anchoring next to like where I live or something? You're trespassing
There's
or whatever.
definitely, I mean, there's only certain places you can do it, right? And there's certain places where it's not safe. So you have to be in a place that's safe, and usually a place that like the wherever you are has designated to be an anchorage, and that's where you go. So like you'd never go and just like drop your anchor in like someone's right in front of someone's like private house or something like that.
Okay, so
But yeah, there's plenty of places that you can.
yeah, I got super just curious about your lifestyle. If you don't want me to include that into the episode,
No,
that's
it's totally
totally
fine.
okay.
I'm happy to talk about it and include everything. I think it's helpful for people to know that part of the reason I have been able to spend so much time is because I lived this lifestyle and intentionally pursued it. Do you know what I mean? I think
Hmm.
that like not knowing that could give people a warped idea of like, oh well, I haven't written X number of books in 2 years, and so what am I doing wrong? It's like, no, I did this for a reason, and this is the reason.
True, true. All right, last question. I just have to ask this, but you don't have to answer. The book that I haven't finished yet, so no spoilers, please. But Salt, your first book,
Mm-hmm.
it's also the characters sailing on a boat, right? I
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
think the physical characteristics are a little bit kind of similar as well. So, how much of you is in that book?
That's 100%. I mean, it's not 100%, but yes, the books are definitely based on not only on my sailing adventures, but also on the main character is definitely sort of just a thinly veiled version of me, and she's struggling with a lot of the same things that I in the last not 2 years, but like a little bit previous to that, was also struggling with. So it's like my own journey to sobriety, sort of understanding my own mental health and dealing with a lot of those issues. And yeah, definitely. And then the book that I'm writing that comes out next year is again just another thinly veiled version of me struggling with all of the problems that I struggle with. So yes, all my characters are definitely super super based on me. I put a lot of myself into my books.
Well, I think that is very brave.
I don't know. We'll see.
Well, and that might be also a reason why it's very hard to read reviews or anything like that, because it's kind of you're in a
That's true,
vulnerable
actually. I never
place,
really
and
thought about that. I did actually once read a review that was like,
I didn't like the main character.
that was like, can't relate to this main character. She's just a complete nightmare. And I was like, oh, okay, great. Well,
But thank you.
sure.
Yeah, very nice. I have just the last thing for my listeners. Where can they find you, your books, so your handles, website, anything else?
Yes, absolutely. So my website is lizshipton.com. My handle on basically everything is just at lizshipton. And I just started a Patreon. So if anyone's interested in checking that out, that's patreon.com/lizshipton. My books are available through Amazon, and they're also available through my online shop, which is at my website.
And soon you're going to have a traditionally published book, which will be
Yes, which
available
will be
everywhere.
everywhere. Yes.
Amazing. Do you have any talks of translations yet?
A couple of people have approached me. I think my agent is shopping around. So she shopped this. Oh, yeah, audiobooks are coming also in the fall. So
Yay!
that was another thing that my agent did for me, actually, was she shopped my indie series around to audiobook publishers and to translators. So audiobooks are coming. I think translations maybe at some point 2025. We'll see.
Amazing, amazing. Okay, thank you so much. I'll put all the links in the show notes for my listeners. Thank you so much for joining me. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you, and sorry for taking more than an hour as always.
No, not at all. I had a great time. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. If you like what you hear so far, please consider subscribing and tune in for the next episode. If you have burning questions about writing you'd like to have answered, head to my Instagram page at kkalbabooks and leave me a message. Or use my email k.k.alba.books@gmail.com. If you'd like your favorite author to answer your question on my show, again, head to my Instagram or email me to let me know which author you'd like me to invite, and I'll try to get over my anxiety and do it. On the other hand, if you're an author who's published at least one book, traditional or indie, and you'd like to become a guest, well, you know what to do by now. Message me and let's get to know each other.